Hamster wheel, not getting anywhere new? Perhaps you've hit a plateau that has you asking, is this it? Have you accomplished all you've set out to do in life and are not feeling as fulfilled as you thought you would? It is normal at midlife to reassess what's working for you and what's not. It's also normal to want to reclaim your time, your energy, and your joy. Let's make the best out of the second half of our lives by having more fun, experiencing more peace, and feeling more joy. If any of this resonates with you, then this podcast is for you. I'm Megan Bayless-Bartley. Now let's get ready to shift our shit.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Shifting Our Shit. I'm Megan Bayless-Bartley, here with one of our awesome therapists at the Mindfulness Center, Elizabeth McCormack. Good morning, Elizabeth.
Good morning, Megan. How are you?
Good. How are you? Now, one thing Rob used to do, I know you've listened to our podcast, so one thing Rob has done in the past, because he was helping me host it, and I'm learning how to host this, is he would say, if today was color, what color would today be? Just off the top of your mind.
I would say yellow.
Yellow.
Yellow. Yeah.
What does yellow mean to you?
For me, it means that I'm not feeling stressed and it's kind of an easy day. I get to be at my house and get stuff done. That makes me feel productive and good. So,
awesome.
Yeah, I'm hopeful for what I can accomplish.
Awesome. Yes, I'm kind of sensing a turquoise, maybe teal even color today. That's one of my favorite colors. I don't normally wear that color, but I like to look at that color because it seems very soothing to me. So feels like it's raining here. We're in Louisville. Elizabeth is joining us from Florida because Elizabeth is one of our providers who lives somewhere else. And so how did you get to Florida? Like what brought you, you've been all over the place.
I have. I've lived in lots of different places. So currently I'm outside of Tampa, and yes, it is sunny in Florida today. And it's August 3rd. So we're in the miserable dog days of nothing but humidity. And you stay inside. And so what I've kind of explained to people who live in places that have seasons is that we just flip-flop. So we're outside during the winter when you all are hibernating inside because it's cold. And then in the summer, when you all get to experience a gentle breeze and the sun on your skin, we're kind of holed up inside. It's sunny, but it's miserably hot. And so we do less outside.
Yes, I understand that. Having lived in Austin, Texas and Tucson, Arizona, yes, it is way different mindset when the summertime hits. Mm-hmm. Well, I do want to tell our listeners, full disclosure, Elizabeth and I are close friends. We met each other in graduate school, which was at the Louisville Presbyterian Seminary here in Kentucky. And that was in 2001. So we have been friends for 22 years.
Yeah, it's a long time. Lots of life has happened since then.
So much has happened. Marriages and babies and work and moving and all sorts of stuff. So I am thrilled to have Elizabeth as one of our providers at the Mindfulness Center. And funnily, is funnily a word? Funny enough, I told Elizabeth years ago, before I was, starting this practice and stuff, I'm like, I'm gonna make this thing, and it's for all of us, this therapy practice. So it's like, it warms my heart to know that Elizabeth is joining me now and gets to come and be a part of all this stuff. So
yeah, it's definitely a benefit from the pandemic. I mean, we all were kind of in our own camp. I was working in Florida. I had a license in Missouri. I'd had a license in Kentucky. And so once the pandemic hit, and it was kind of like, oh, well, if I just renew licenses other places, I can see other people. And Megan, you were gracious to be like, hey, what would it be like? And it would give me an opportunity to come to town more often and relive those, graduate school memories and all of that. So
exactly.
Really fun.
Yes, and Elizabeth has lived in Louisville, so she knows Louisville backwards and forwards, and she
Yeah.
comes to town and sees clients in person from time to time, but she also sees clients in Florida. And so for people who may relocate from the Midwest to Florida, Elizabeth's a wonderful option too for our Florida-based clients as well. But
Yeah,
Elizabeth, go ahead.
Yeah, I kind of think that eventually all of these state lines and kind of all this, you have to see somebody in within the state. I think eventually that'll get worked out. But for the meantime, I can see anybody that is residing in Florida or residing in Kentucky,
Yes.
and
Yeah,
work that
it
out.
makes yes, it makes it very helpful. Yeah, it's interesting being a therapist and having to follow the rules and the laws of what you can and can't do as far as that all goes. It's yeah, I do hope that all gets worked out because it is what the future holds, right?
Oh, for sure.
But we want to know about you, Elizabeth. We want to know, like, how did you become a therapist? Like, where are you from? How has your journey led you to want to listen to people's problems all day? Help people problem solve. Let's put it that way.
People are always kind of amazed that that's what I do all day. So I'm a Midwesterner. I grew up in Illinois. I graduated from high school in Bloomington, Illinois, which is just, excuse me, a couple hours outside of Chicago, because everything in Illinois is positioned to where is it in location to Chicago.
Chicago. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And all of my family, my parents grew up in a small town there in Shelbyville, and I then went on to college. I was Presbyterian growing up, and so I ended up at Hanover College in Southern Indiana, did my 4 years there, graduating in 2000. Then I went straight to graduate school for my Master's of Divinity and a Master's in Marriage and Family Therapy at the seminary in Louisville.
Mm-hmm.
Lived there for several years to finish those degrees, which is where I met Megan. It's where I met my husband.
Mm-hmm.
We had a great time. It was lovely.
Mm-hmm.
But then kind of traveling around, my spouse graduated before I did. So I ended up being what we refer to as the trailing spouse. And so I needed to have a career that could adjust to his needs when he needed to move and take a different job than we needed to shift. So we lived in Rhineyville, which is outside of Elizabethtown. We lived in Bowling Green. So I've been kind of all over the 65 corridor in Kentucky, back and forth. I drove from Rhineyville to Louisville to finish my degree while he was working in Bowling Green. So we, tore up the road there for a while. And then we had our first son and moved to Kirksville, Missouri, which is a tiny little rural town. And I worked kind of all that time working towards licenses and shifting states and all the lovely parts of making that shift happen. Really, really fun. So we had our first kid. He is now a senior in high school. So that was 17 years
crazy.
ago. He turns 18 this fall. So it's a whole different world of trying to get ready for college. It's nothing like what it was 20 years ago. So, so that's really fun. When I was in Bowling Green and in that shift initially, early in my career, I was a foster care therapist. And so I just went around to foster homes and saw young kids doing therapy. That worked for a while. And then I became a group home therapist for boys. Having only sons myself, I've always kind of had a niche for teenage boys and kind of understanding the difficulties that they go through. And as parents, what we go through parenting boys. I later then had another son. He is currently 13 and going into the 8th grade. So those are the boys. We moved to Kirksville. We lived there about 9 years. We then shifted to Florida. And we've been here 8 this week. I moved down 8 years ago to Florida.
Wow.
So
how, at what point, in your childhood, did you say, like, I'm going to be a therapist or minister? Because you studied divinity, you studied therapy. Like, what did you think you were going to do? Or how did you get to that point where you were like, this is sort of the field I want to be in?
So it was pretty much an academic journey getting from high school into Hanover. I was a theology major at Hanover, kind of thinking I was going to go into ministry and love doing youth group, programming kind of stuff.
Yes.
And once I got to seminary and really, shifting from college to seminary, studying some of the, tradition of religion and shifting, I started to kind of notice like, maybe theology isn't necessarily my best bet. And just kind of the conflict among the church, I really got to a place where I was like, I'm not sure this is exactly my field. And so that's when I got really interested, taking a lot of psych classes in college and then becoming interested in the Louisville Seminary because it had the dual program. And so that really kind of shifted for me. And I continued to get kind of affirmation from the community of like, you're really good at this. This is really where, kind of your knack is. And so even if it was in ministry, it was still leaning towards pastoral care and
Yes.
being present with people. But once I started really getting into the therapy, really enjoying understanding kind of people's behavior and how they communicate with one another, I just felt like a place that I really fit in as a teacher to kind of help people learn how they feel, what they feel, and naming that,
Yes.
and kind of helping them move through some of the difficulties of relationships because it's hard out there.
Yes, yes. And that's, our training at the Presbyterian Seminary was very focused around relationships, and not only the relationship with other people, but the relationship we have with ourselves, with the relationship we have with God or the universe or the world or however we want to see it. But so relationships have always been a big focus for all of us. And you really, we all really love boundaries, but you really love boundaries. Tell us more about boundaries.
Yeah, for me, I feel like we all kind of absorb the world we live in. And so the better we can be aware of ourselves, the less likely we are to absorb what's happening around us. And I don't want my behavior to be subject to whoever's mad or people honking in traffic or a cashier at the grocery store who's in a bad mood. My job isn't to fix their emotions. My job is to be in control of my own. And so I give little kids the kind of the metaphor of don't be a SpongeBob. So I have a plushy SpongeBob in my other office where I'm like, okay, your job is not to absorb the feelings of everybody else around you. Your job is to pay attention to how you feel. And so they really love kind of that SpongeBob thing. For
Yes.
adults, I try to tell them to like think about being in traffic and you're on maybe the Watterson Expressway if you're in Louisville. If you're in Florida, you're on any road that has multiple lanes, which is all of them. And so sitting in traffic is something really common for us in Florida. And we see people that are just zipping through everybody else's lane, trying to, show that they're in more of a hurry than the rest of us and that their needs are going to override everybody else. And so my job is to kind of help them say like, okay, what is really in your lane? Is it that you need to take care of the people in the lanes next to you? Are you aware of their emotional state? And then when we're in our own household, how good are we at like letting our kid be upset for a minute because they're experiencing some really tough feelings for their little body? They're overwhelmed. I don't need to get overwhelmed with them. That doesn't help them. And lots of people who have issues with like, oh, I'm an empath and I just absorb everything around me because I'm trying to be helpful to my friend, to my colleague at work, whatever that might look like. It's like, actually, it's not helpful for you to join them in that way. Actually, you can hear them and hear what they're going through and provide empathy and compassion without joining and feeling what they're going through. And so a lot of times, if we aren't aware of what we're feeling, we just sponge right up next to them and absorb what they're feeling. And then nobody is actually helpful and nobody's in like the proper state of their brain. They're just kind of running into fight or flight with them. They're triggered. And then the emotions kind of run wild instead of saying like, okay, I'm going to stay in my prefrontal cortex. I'm going to stay in control of how I feel and my behavior. Actually joining them is not going to help them. Seeing them, being a good listener, that's what's helpful.
Yes. And what I was thinking about when you were talking is how that's what we do as therapists, right? Like we don't join our clients in being upset or sad or angry or wherever they're at in the moment. We stay in our lane and give them the space to be wherever they're at, with the idea that hopefully we'll have something to say that's going to be beneficial or some tools for their toolbox to handle all of life stressors. But the same with parenting is like, the more we just stay calm and let the kiddo feel their feelings, and when they do calm down, maybe then they'll be ready to hear some suggestions, or not. Maybe they don't need to, they just need to feel their feelings.
Yeah. And sometimes it's really helpful for us to kind of hold up a mirror to them to be like, gosh, it looks like you're really angry. It's okay. I'm not afraid of your anger. I'm not going to get upset at you for being angry. Anger is
Yes.
a normal emotion. And so
Yes.
I think for folks, it's like, okay, if I can stay in control of myself, it becomes so much easier to be able
Yes.
to see our kids and say, okay, you're a little body, but you have big feelings, and that's okay. I'm not afraid of that. It doesn't hurt my feelings that you're mad. We can together partner. And whether that does mean that I'm going to slow my breathing so that the kiddo will slow their breathing,
Yes.
or
Yes.
interacting with our partner, like, it's easy to get mad if our partner's coming at us and maybe didn't use some softer communication with like a soft startup maybe.
Yes.
But
Yes.
it is helpful if we can just say like, they are feeling something right now. It's helpful
Right.
for me to not feel that with them, but to stay in control of myself.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Elizabeth, we are going to wrap up our time in part 1 right now, and we're going to invite our listeners to join us in part 2, because Elizabeth has some fun stuff to share with us here in part 2, because, she's been a therapist, as long as I have. So, 20 plus years. And, it's interesting when you have that amount of experience and to reflect on your own experience in therapy. So I'll be curious to see what you have to impart on us. So join us in part 2, and thanks for joining us here in part 1.